Greetings, everyone. Dale Parrish, host COS Indiana Live, along with our co-host Ken Kashuba. Ken, I thought I got a message? Are we not connected to YouTube? Can you tell?
Let me check. Let me post something and see if something is working in the chat.
I thought as we were preparing that intro, I thought I saw something about us not being able to connect, or maybe it was Facebook we couldn't connect to, or something.
Actually, that's what I'm getting as a message here. It shows that YouTube is up and running, and StreamYard has lost access to our Facebook account.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
Connect to your destination. I'm not sure if I can connect that from here or not, but probably not. Got to log into Facebook in order to reconnect it. I thought that's a message that was popping up here too in the pink. So
yeah. Well, I think this has happened before, so and I don't think there's anything we can do about it.
No, it's something that I don't know why StreamYard does that now and again. This reconnection thing that they do, but it is what it is, I guess.
It is what it is. We'll just proceed, and at least I know we're on YouTube.
Yep.
And so hopefully you can find us and get the recording off of our YouTube channel, Indiana Patriots for Convention of States.
Yeah, Certain Elf has confirmed that. He says fine on YouTube is what he's on YouTube. So
okay, all right, good.
Yep.
Well, Ken's normal duties, as you probably know if you've watched our live stream in the past, Ken will be monitoring our viewer comments and questions, and will certainly let us know if there's a comment or a question that we need to address. So feel free, if you're viewing this evening, feel free to drop us a line, and we'll do our best to acknowledge that. So Ken, always like to put these numbers up. This is broadcast number 263, and you've been on board for 124. Ken, that's over 2 years worth of live streams that you've been on. Is that true?
That's true, and I think I've got more gray in my beard and less hair on my head too.
Are you getting like me? Is that what you're trying to say?
Well, you look at 263 versus 124, and you look at what's here.
You can tell the difference, can't you? Okay.
Well, all right. Before I hit the 200 mark.
Yeah. Once again, I've set myself up for being criticized again. Okay. All right.
Criticized. It's the truth.
Well, Ken, give us a little shot on that QR code up there.
Sure will. We're looking to add subscribers, Dale. So I'll put out this pitch to our YouTube viewers tonight. That little QR code will get you a subscription to COS Indiana Live. We are trying to make that as unique and as useful as possible. By that I say we are adding a lot of our material that is recorded and pre-recorded there. A lot of our contributors and different types of interviews that we've had over time shows up there, along with just a group of people that have signed on that you're welcome to interface with. So it's a nice little group, and we're looking to expand that. So if you just take your smartphone out and capture that QR code, you can put in your name and email address, and we'll get you subscribed. And I'll also put a link in the chat for those that prefer to do things in the URL manner. But that's what that QR code is all about.
Ken, you'll be very impressed. I was at the grocery store today, and I wanted to buy a product, and it was on sale if I would scan and download the coupon. And of course, I was able to do that, scanning the QR code on the sign, and I was able to save some money on that product. So, see, I'm really getting acclimated to these QR codes. I'll tell you.
We're gonna make a Gen Xer out of you yet.
All right. Well, Ken, we got a jam-packed program tonight, and the first thing I want to do is I kind of got on a rant this past week, and so I wanted to get on my soapbox and express a little opinion. So I'm going to play that for us right now. Okay.
All right.
Greetings, everyone. Dale Parrish, host COS Indiana Live. A concept that I want to talk about tonight on my soapbox is that of accountability. I think this is something that is severely lacking in our country today. So I want to talk about that just for a bit. I went to AI for a definition of accountability, and I'd like to read this to you if you don't mind. Accountability refers to the obligation or willingness of an individual, group, or organization to accept responsibility for their actions, decisions, and the outcomes of those actions. It involves being answerable to others, especially those who are impacted by one's actions, and is often accompanied by transparency, oversight, and the willingness to face consequences for any failures or mistakes. Now, that's a pretty good definition, I think, of accountability. And what has brought this to my attention most recently has been the 3-year anniversary of our withdrawal from Afghanistan. And of course, the horrible thing that happened at what was called Abbey with the 13 military individuals that lost their lives. And let me just show you very quickly here a little bit of what transpired most recently in remembrance of these individuals and trying to get further and further to the truth of what happened in Afghanistan. I think this is a glaring example, to my knowledge, at least. No one has been really held accountable for what happened in Afghanistan, the pullout in Afghanistan, and certainly Abbey. And I truly hope that in this upcoming election, those individuals that should be held accountable are in fact held accountable. So that's my that's what I want to get on the soapbox for this evening. There are many, many other examples of the lack of accountability. We could spend a great deal of time on this topic, but I just wanted to get on the soapbox tonight and let you know how I feel about this. I think it's something that's severely lacking in our country today. So that's it for tonight. Thank you. Goodbye. All right. Well, thanks everyone for listening to that. It's just something that really hit me this past week. It just seems like every which way you turn anymore, there's just this lack of accountability. Ken, do you see that too?
I think it's one of the biggest problems we have with our government, today and for some time really is the fact that there's just no accountability in any of the departments and the places that we look to for a steady leadership of accountability, and it shows up in our Justice Department. It shows up in our executive branch. It really has caused, I think, consternation with the people that we just feel, no accountability. So I think that's why you get that attitude where people say, why bother? It doesn't, anything I do doesn't matter anyway, because nobody's ever held accountable. So yeah, I think it's a big problem. But your timing is good. Your timing is good.
Well, the protests and all the things that go on at the protest was another area. So anyway, that I wanted to get on the soapbox and talk about that briefly. So
that's good. We haven't had a soapbox for a while, and I will tell you, Dale, too. I just posted, so you know, I posted a note on our Facebook page telling people, what technological problem we've had tonight, and invited them to join us on YouTube. So
okay, good. Thank you. Well, On our last broadcast, we tried playing this video from Gary Harbaugh on a debt clock, and for some reason it wouldn't play. So we're going to try it again. And this is the first installment where Gary is going to go through the actual debt clock because there's a wealth of information there. So let's try this one more time, and let's hope it plays tonight. All right, here we go.
Hi, it's Gary, and this is our next installment on the debt avalanche. You see on my screen here the U.S. debt clock, and you see this figure up here in the upper left. We've surpassed $35 trillion in the national debt. I think I've talked about that previously and how enormous that figure is. And you look at the debt per citizen and per taxpayer and so forth. But today I want to focus in a different area. I'm going to move this screen over a bit. We're going to look at the total tax revenue. So here's the total tax revenue. What has come in so far this year, about 4 trillion, approaching 5 trillion. If we annualize that and look at it per citizen, it amounts to about close to $15,000 per citizen. If you are part of a household of a couple, and between the two of you, you're paying about close to $30,000 a year, directly or indirectly. And you think, wait a minute, I'm not paying anywhere near $30,000 a year in taxes. My spouse and I, no way. But every time you gas up your car, you're paying a federal excise tax. Every time you do business with a corporation, you are paying more so that the corporation can pay taxes. So a great deal of that tax is hidden from you, but the total, on average, tax revenue per couple in the United States is approaching $30,000. That's a lot of money. Let's take a look now at these next line of figures, total state tax revenue and total local tax revenue. So what you see here is that the state tax revenue is about half of what federal revenue is, and the local revenue is about half of what the state tax revenue is. Clock is chiming, telling me I've been talking too long probably, but anyway, I'm going to keep going. Let these figures sink into you. If $30,000 is being paid in federal, then there's another 15 to 20,000 is being paid in state and local taxes. These are ginormous sums of money that is going to government at all levels. I want to direct your attention next to the state debt, about $1 trillion, and that amounts to about $3,000, close to $4,000 per citizen. Let's look at local debt. You notice local debt is even higher than state debt. So if your local favorite National Football League team threatens to leave town, what do states or what do cities and counties do? They say, hey, we'll build you a new stadium. And they might take on millions or maybe billions in debt. So local debt actually exceeds state debt. So add that on top of what the federal national debt is, begin to get an image of how big the debt really is in America. And let's drop down to this next figure. And again, as you point your pointer at any of these figures, a description of it will pop up in this debt clock box. So the total worker compensation, this is all the workers in the United States have earned about $14 billion so far, $14 trillion this year. And here's the total of federal and local and state spending. It's about 10 trillion, approaching 11. If you figure this out, the math, this is about exceeds 70% of all worker compensation. So if you want to know how big the government is in the United States, federal, state, and local, take a look at this figure of total state, local, and federal spending in relation to what the compensation is of all the workers in the United States. It's more than 70%. This tells you government is way too big. The framers of our Constitution never dreamed of a large federal government. They gave the federal government limited powers, and they assumed that the state and local government would be doing most of the spending, providing most of the government services, and incurring most of the government's debt. That has been turned on its head. It's upside down. The federal government is too big. Government at all levels is probably too big and spends too much. This is why we need a convention of the states to start putting limits on federal spending and the exercise of federal power. And to help get that done, we need to put limits on how long the folks are in government that are feeding at the government trough. I hope you will not only study these figures on the debt clock, but also share this with other people. Let them know about how big government really is, how out of control government is, and why we need a convention of the states. Come back again for the next installment of the Debt Avalanche.
You know, Dale, I know you're muted, so I'll give you a chance to unmute. But
Okay.
what I was going to say is, I don't think Gary realized that the chiming of his clock was so prophetic. I think the clock is telling us that that time is running out. We are running out of time to fix this.
I think we are. We got to be. I mean, of course, I've heard that saying, time is running short, time is running out. I've heard that for years now. But I think I think we are getting to a point where it's got to happen. Time has got to be running out here on us.
I would think so. And it's also running out on our politicians. There are very few that even bring this up. I know Senator Rand Paul has done it, and a few others, but it's not a topic in our federal government. It's just not a topic. They just get the pen out and print more money and write more checks.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Matter of fact, Ken, that reminds me, we've got a video from that Senator Tom Coburn made. We need to play that on an upcoming program here, along with another installment from Gary on the debt avalanche. Because, folks, this is a major issue, and this is one of the Convention of States' main pillars, one of the three pillars that we would like addressed at this first Convention of States, and that is to address the national debt. This is a real biggie, and now we should be hearing some more about this month, because we've got a deadline coming up here at the end of September, I believe, don't we?
Yeah, and it's also, I mean, we talk about it being one of our pillars, but it's also important as people sit down and get ready to vote in this election.
Well, yes,
you need to do the math. You need to do the math on some of these policies that are being proposed. I'm not going to go ahead and get into anything on either side right now, but if you really look at both sides and discover where, how much, who's paying for this stuff? Where's this money coming from? And we can't continue to just throw out these programs and as fixes and expect our debt avalanche to stop. So
yeah. All right. Well, we'll get Gary back again and continue going through that debt clock. Like I said, there's a wealth of information there, so it's. We'll look forward to him giving us another installment on that. So, well, I want to now move on to our main feature this evening, and that is our interview with Mark Archer, who is one of the owners of Fearless Features. And Fearless Features has, we've had them on our program before. When they produced and put out their documentary called Dysphoria. This one, this newest one that they've just released, is called Title IX, and this is very much about what's happening with the changes to Title IX now that the administration has tried to implement. So, Ken, we've got, before we get into the actual interview with Mark, I got actually two trailers here that I would like to play. Um, they're very short ones, but it kind of, very, I think, set the stage for what they're trying to communicate here with this latest documentary. So I want to play those. I want to play these trailers. We don't have them combined, so as soon as one stops, I'll play the second one. Okay.
Sounds good.
The Biden administration is amending Title IX to expand protections to LGBTQ students in schools that receive federal funding.
How big is the scope of this change?
Well, sweeping changes, Marquis, very much so. Schools are digesting it over the weekend. It not only impacts colleges, but it impacts federally funded schools, K through 12.
The fact that the Biden administration and many in this country have basically lost their moral compass, okay? They absolutely have. The fact that we will now push women out of positions simply because there are people out there that want to identify as an opposite sex.
When I saw the news on what Joe Biden just did to women's rights and Title IX and due process for young men on college campuses and free speech, I was horrified.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and play the second trailer, so we'll get them together here. Here we go.
Really shocking, but it's not really surprising considering that international research repeatedly portrays that 0.5 up to even 3% of our male population has some form of pedophilic interest.
What they'll do is they'll pick this identity group, and their goal is to turn this identity group into a victim status where they can claim rights at law.
We must fight discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity, and we must prosecute those who target victims for violence because of who they are or whom they love.
The Biden administration is amending Title IX to expand protections to LGBTQ students in schools that receive federal funding.
What's happening in the public schools now is a deliberate attempt to convince our children that they may be transgenders. It's being portrayed as cool.
Used to be fashionable by being gay. Now you're fashionable by being trans, you know, and everybody celebrates you. Well, you want to be celebrated.
We are in a battle right now that is far beyond Democrat and Republican. We are talking now in the realm of good versus evil.
Good trailers.
They are. Just a note for everyone: in that second trailer, the gentleman that was interviewed with the beard and suit, his name is Alex Newman, and he is coming on our program in October. So we're going to set up a time to interview him. He appeared both in Dysphoria as well as this latest documentary, Title IX, and he talks about, and I want him to expand upon this, and he's also, I understand, had written a book about the administrative state. So I think this is all really tied together. But he talks about the process, how these types of things incrementally come about. And I think it's a very interesting insight, and I want to pick his brain on that. So that'll be coming up in October. Alex Newman is his name. Okay, let's go to then the interview that I did. This is part one of the interview with Mark Archer. Actually, it's Mark and Amber, his wife Amber Archer, are the two primary individuals involved in Fearless Features. So let's go with my interview with Mark here, part one. Greetings, everyone. Dale Parrish, host of COS Indiana Live. As we've mentioned to you already, we have a very special guest this evening that we want to bring to you. And this is the owner and operator, actually one of the owners and operators of Fearless Features. And this is the group that has created the latest documentary called Title IX. So I want to bring on our guest here and introduce you to him. Hello, this is Mark Amber, folks. Mark, no, you're not Mark. You're Mark Archer.
Right. Amber apologizes she can't make it tonight, but we are active parents, and we have one playing volleyball tonight. So Amber is with her.
Well,
here I am.
That's important. That's important to be there. So I can understand that. I do want to mention before, and so we don't forget it here, is that you're going to be presenting your latest documentary, Title IX. As a matter of fact, this weekend on Saturday, right, the 14th.
That's right. If you're in the Fort Wayne area, Saturday, I think it starts at 1 p.m. It's co-hosted with Moms for Liberty of Allen County.
Right.
Natalie Forbing, and 200 East Main. So it would be the used to be the Standard Federal Building. Now it's it's a different bank now. Anyway.
Yeah.
And First Source Bank Building.
First Source. Okay.
And hop in the elevator, come up to the 7th floor. There's free parking, and tickets are actually free for this screening. So it's a 1 p.m. matinee. We're going to be showing Title IX in its entirety. The movie's about an hour and 9 minutes long, so it leaves good time for discussion afterwards, and I'll be there.
Good.
Love to have people come out.
Yes, Natalie has been our guest before, actually a couple times.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, Moms for Liberty is a group that we are very closely associated with. So good group of people, and Natalie's very good leader for the local chapter here. Well, Mark, let's take a look at your website here,
okay.
And I want everybody to understand and get this address, fearlessfeatures.org.
Mm-hmm.
So let me bring up, and we'll take a look at it here. This is quite a nice introduction to your website. So this is where you can go and look at the different, or get some information at least on the various documentaries. You know, I call them documentaries. Mark, do you refer to them as movies? I've heard the term movie used. Does it make any difference?
They're kind of nebulous terms. I mean, they are in the documentary format. But you can call it a documentary movie, film. It's, they're kind of fluid terms these days. So.
Okay.
But it's definitely the informational narrative type of a documentary films, right? We have interviews, and Amber and I host them, and it's a lot of information that's presented.
Yes. Well, I like the term documentary as in my opinion. But anyway, that's just me. So there's a lot of different features on your website. You can shop. You can give gifts. And you can rent these documentaries. Mm-hmm. So I would encourage everyone to go to your website and learn more about Fearless Features. One of the areas that I would like to specifically mention with you is the podcast area, mm-hmm. where you and Amber do a podcast. Do you have a set schedule for your podcasts, or how do you determine when to do one?
Yeah, our podcast we release every Tuesday. And for a while, we were doing 2 a week, and then we just decided we couldn't keep up with that schedule.
I can understand, yes.
Because we want to spend the majority of our time making the movies, and so we started the podcast actually during COVID, during all the lockdowns, and we had our first title, Inwood Drive, was done, and we couldn't get it. All the theaters shut down, and you couldn't get on any of the streaming platforms because everyone was trying to get onto the streaming platforms. And so we were trying to market the film, and the films that we make are heavily suppressed by social media because they don't want you talking about things like abortion and transgenderism and anything conservative and Christian. So we started the podcast just as a way to talk about our movies, and it's just we've just kept going with it. And when we started, neither one of us said, "Hey, I really want to be a podcaster." Right? and so when we started, I read something that said, if you can survive 100 episodes, then you're a podcaster.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. So we're approaching 300 episodes now, and so I guess we're podcasters. But everything that we do, our podcast is Amber and I talking about. We have guests on sometimes. Sometimes it's just us talking about things in the news and a Christian worldview perspective, and also our perspective as filmmakers. So a lot of the things that it all has very much a film and entertainment industry perspective, because that's what we do, and because we're kind of insiders on that, so we're believers, so we have a unique perspective on it, and we call out a lot of the nonsense. So
okay, well, I would encourage everyone to look at that particular part of your website. Like I said, I really enjoyed it, and I've mentioned to you before that I get some good leads on potential guests for our program. So, because you interview some very interesting people.
Mm-hmm.
One of them, I know you've played some clips from Laura Logan. If you have any connection with her, I'd love to.
I don't really. So a lot of times clips like that I pull off of social media. I think I got that off of X, and I'm sure eventually I could track her down, but I haven't really tried yet. I just thought that was a snippet from somebody else's podcast where she was talking about the occult and how it all works. So,
well, I would love to talk with her. I've always admired her work, and
she's an honest journalist.
Yes, so. Yes, very good. Well, if you ever get a connection, let me know.
I'll certainly let you know.
Okay.
You'll hear her on our podcast, and then you'll know.
Then I'll know. That's right. Okay. Tell us, well, first of all, I jumped here a little bit. Tell us a little bit about the history of Fearless Features. I know we've had you on before, I understand, but kind of give our viewers a brief history of how you came about, how this was created, and how this came about.
Sure. So I have been in the film industry since I was in my teens, really. I started in production when I was very young. Got my start in the church, running a television camera for our church. And all through high school, I was freelancing and learning the business, started producing and directing, learned editing and lighting and all those things. And then I started in just as a scrapper, basically. I mean, just hitting the streets, trying to find a way to make a movie. And being in Fort Wayne, Indiana, in the early and mid 90s, that was not an easy thing. And but we tend to when you pursue something relentlessly, you tend to find it. So so I made my way to being connected to some other people in the local area that were making a movie, and they asked me to come on and be the producer. which was quite an honor. And but they needed someone who knew how to kind of organize and run a production, and I had demonstrated that I could do that. And I was still fairly young. I was in my early 20s.
Right.
And so that's where I got my start, and we made several movies together. And
what was your first movie that you were involved in? What was the first one? Do you remember?
So my very first movie was called In the Company of Men, and was not a God honoring film at all. I was, I was running from the Lord, and I was saying, I'll get back to you, God. I gotta get my big break, and then I'll come back and I'll help you out.
All right.
But In the Company of Men was a dark 90s film festival kind of a film, and we made it. We shot the whole film in 11 days for $25,000, and then we sent it off to Sundance, and we got in to the 1997 Sundance Film Festival, and then we won, and then we sold the film to Sony Pictures, and then suddenly you have a career.
Wow.
All of us kind of, it opened up a lot of career opportunities. So Aaron Eckhart was one of the guys that was it was his first film, and Aaron Eckhart is Harvey Dent from the Dark Knight movie, and so Aaron made his first movie with me making my first movie here in Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Okay.
Matt Malloy and Stacey Edwards and Neil LaBute, and there were a lot of us that kind of kicked us into high gear. And then so that was my first, and then I made several others after that, and then went off into television and music videos and things like that. When Amber and I met, I was kind of trying to figure out what I was doing, and one thing led to another. And when we got married, she got drafted into the business. So my bread and butter had still always been doing corporate and commercial work. It's very hard to get into the film business and stay only in the film business. It's a really volatile industry.
Yeah.
And so my regular work was still all the boring stuff. And every couple of years I would get a big film project to do. And so she got drafted in, and we started working together doing corporate videos and promotional videos, TV commercials, things like that. And she had a knack for it too. She also had a photography background, so she helped me out a lot with improving my imagery. And then when we started doing the more of the corporate work where you have to interview people,
mm-hmm.
and I've always been good at putting the stuff together, and I can light and I can shoot and edit and all that, but there's a fine art to interviewing people, and Amber is much prettier than I am, and she's I think much more personable. And so there was some point where we were doing a corporate video, and I said, tell you what, I'm going to sit you down, and here's the questions you ask them. You ask them the questions, and that way I don't have to. And when that's really where it started. And it was amazing how much better the end product was when she was asking the questions, because she's just natural at it. And
yeah, good.
So that's how we got started in that. And then that grew into Fearless Features, where we started doing documentaries, long form documentaries. And I hadn't made anything long form, 60 minutes or more. I hadn't done that in many years. And so we started Fearless Features with our first title, which was Inwood Drive.
Yes.
About the downfall of George Klopfer, the abortionist.
Right.
That led us into The Mind Polluters, which was our second title, which is all about the comprehensive sex ed and the pornographic books in the libraries,
mm-hmm.
social emotional learning. That's led us into a film that we released about a year ago called Dysphoria, which is all about transgenderism and the roots of it, the communist roots of all of that, and really the occultic roots of all that. And then the film that we are just releasing now is what I like to term as the leftovers. It's called Title IX, and Title IX is if you've watched Dysphoria, you'll recognize a lot of the people in Title IX because it's the part of Dysphoria that I had to cut out.
Okay.
And so we went back and looked at it, and I went, there's enough here to make a good hour. I said, there's at least a good hour here, and specifically talking, because we, even before the Title IX issue was an issue, we knew it was going to be an issue. So when we were interviewing people, we were asking them about Title IX. So we had all this stuff, and we looked at it and said, well, this is actually kind of timely. Let's just put this
Okay,
out.
before you get into the actual documentary Title IX, one thing that's just popped in my mind with regard to the history of Fearless Features and developing Fearless Features is I remember Amber telling me one day that this was a ministry, that you considered this a ministry. This is not just a company.
Right.
This is a ministry. Can you comment on that a bit as to
absolutely
why? So
Fearless Features is a 501c3. And the reason we did that is because we knew that we knew that the Lord was calling us to make these films on the tough topics and do it from a Christian worldview.
Yes.
And to be just totally blunt, it is a difficult road to travel. And we knew that it was the traditional model of making movies where you get investors and they expect a return because it's going to be popular. And, we knew that was not going to be feasible with films like these because these are difficult topics. And it's not that people don't want the information, but the gatekeepers to the distribution outlets still, even with the World Wide Web, the gatekeepers are still there. And so if you want to monetize things, there's still a lot of gatekeepers in the way.
Yeah.
And so we basically said, we're going to make this a ministry and ask people to support us in doing this. And when we tell people what we do and we say, listen, these are not, big money making projects, but they're important. And so you're supporting that, and there are people that need to hear this information. So
there are some real financial implications here by deciding to go that route.
Yeah,
correct.
It's really about the only way that you can get stuff like this done, because if you're trying to appeal to the commercial market, and you with the kinds of messages that we have in our films and the raw truth that we expose, you're just going to get shut down.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Well, I wanted you to comment on that particular point because I think it's important that people understand that your effort here is a ministry. It's not just a.
We are 100% donor funded. We don't take influencer money. We've been offered it many times, and we've always said no.
Okay. All right. Well, Mark, let's take a break here. We've enjoyed it so far, but we need time-wise. We're out of time for this particular segment. So let's take a break, and we'll be back with the next segment very shortly. Thank you.
Interesting group, or interesting couple, Mark and Amber.
Very much, very much. By the way, obviously, the September 14th viewing you've missed. if you're hearing this for the first time, I live in Fort Wayne, and I did go down to the viewing, and I did attend that. That was a Moms for Liberty sponsored viewing, and Mark was there and made a great presentation. And in addition to the viewing, the actual documentary. So I really enjoyed doing that. Got to talk to a few people about Convention of States. I was there with my big button on my lapel, and so I was there representing Convention of States. Just I want to mention, Mark may address this in part two. I can't remember, but one of their documentaries called Mind Polluters, that apparently has been the most distributed, the most viewed documentary that has been in 144 countries around the world. So that's quite impressive, quite amazing, I thought. So again, he may get into that in part two. I can't really remember for sure, but anyway.
Well, I find it interesting that obviously he said that, you know, when he started out, he was not actually doing anything that that he would consider God's work. And at this point, the route that they've traveled, it's interesting to see when somebody commits themselves to doing what they feel called to do, they do it, and God does the work. He does the rest. And if a film like that has reached 134 countries, it's all to the glory of God, really. So.
It is, and they've told me stories about how they, again, financially. I hope you can understand this. You know, there are times when, you know, they were broke. They didn't have any money, and bingo, all of a sudden, a major supporter would step forward, and you know, you got to wonder, God have a role in that, you know? So anyway, and I think he mentions this in part two, but I know their next viewing that they're doing with Title IX is October. I believe it's October 25th. It's in Elkhart, and it's at a church, and the name of it escapes me right now, but we'll try and. We're gonna have, as a matter of fact, on our broadcast September 30th, we're gonna have part two of our interview. So we'll get another chance to hear some more information, and I think he tells us where that next viewing is going to be. So hope everybody enjoyed that. I certainly enjoy talking with Mark all the time. Well, Ken, let's talk about a few things coming up here, and we'll be heading here to close out our broadcast this evening. But the next broadcast coming up, the next live stream, is our roundtable, which is coming up on September 23rd, and the topic is Article 2, Presidential Powers. So that ought to be very, very interesting. John Ackerman just does a great job with our roundtable. I'm sure he'll have some interesting points for us to discuss and talk about on the roundtable. So everyone, that's coming up on September 23rd. So now after that, then September 30th, as I mentioned, will be our next live stream, and we will have part two of our interview with Mark from Fearless Features. So that'll be the main part of our program, and I think we'll also probably have on September 30th, we'll have another part of Larry Hudson's Meet the Founders, part two of the George Washington founder that he has focused on. So that's coming up on September 30th. And I also want to mention anyone that has any comments or questions about our program this evening, feel free to drop us an email at raiseyourvoicecos@gmail.com. It's raiseyourvoicecos@gmail.com. All right. Well, Kim, we're running a little ahead of time this evening for a change.
Good news.
Any comments or questions from anyone that we need to take a look at?
No, I think they're all pretty much sat back in their easy chairs tonight and listened to Mark, and I think they're probably just pretty much amazed at what they do as a couple. So we really haven't had any communication here, asking any questions or comments. So I think everybody's still digesting that. But I think certainly we're missing some of our Facebook people tonight. So
yeah,
trying to get caught up on that. But
all right. Well, let's close out with another episode from John Ackerman, COS Basics. And John's just doing a great job on these. This is actually episode number 14, and John has already logged, I think, 25 episodes that we have in the bank yet here. So we'll be presenting many more as time goes on.
One quick question, Dale, before you head off to do that. I just want to make sure I have this right, because somebody asked if we have the link to their page. It was fearlessfilms.org.
Fearlessfeatures.org.
Fearless Features. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and put that into the chat so that we cover that link for people. Fearlessfeatures.org. There it is.
Yeah.
All right.
Yep,
got it.
Okay. Well, we'll play this episode of COS Basics with John Ackerman, and this is about a constitutional convention. So he's going to talk about what this convention is going to really be about that we're trying to bring about. So once this video stops, then Ken and I will be done for the evening. So everyone, have a good evening, and we will see you on September 23rd for the roundtable. So, all right, everyone, have a good evening.
John Ackerman for Convention of States, Indiana. This is the ongoing COS Basics series on myth busting. And here's the myth that I'm going to bust today. Those who say an Article 5 convention is a constitutional convention. In other words, they say that it is intended to replace the entire Constitution. They say everything would be up for grabs, just like at the very first Constitutional Convention, 1787. We would lose our Bill of Rights. We could even get a whole new Constitution. That's the myth. Here's the fact. An Article 5 convention has to have a defined agenda. It's not a wide open, anything goes event. And here's the interesting thing. Both the left and the right agree on this. The left and the right don't agree on much these days, but one thing all legislators agree on is that a convention has to have a defined agenda. The phrase constitutional convention and the implication that everything is up for grabs was originally part of a disinformation campaign launched by liberals in the late 50s and early 60s. And here's why it's disinformation. First of all, the language of Article 5 is perfectly clear, okay? There's only one thing this convention can do. It can propose amendments. That's it. From start to finish. That's the only thing it can do. Propose amendments. Look at the text of Article 5. It restricts amendments to the Constitution, this Constitution. And I'm quoting here. In Article 5, it says, quote, amendments shall be valid as part of this Constitution, close quote. Now, I underscored the word this. It's not underscored in the Constitution, but I wanted to call it to your attention. Article 5 itself says, quote, amendments shall be valid as part of this Constitution, close quote. And listen to what Roger Sherman said on August 13th, 1789. Here again I'm quoting, all that is granted us by the fifth article is that whenever we shall think it necessary, we may propose amendments to the Constitution, not that we may propose to repeal the old and substitute a new one, close quote. So Article 5 itself says that amendments shall be valid as part of this Constitution. And one of the framers himself, Roger Sherman, said in 1789, the only thing that Article 5 grants is that whenever we think it's necessary, we may propose amendments to the Constitution. Not we can throw it out and come up with a whole new one. And so, myth busted. An Article 5 convention is not a constitutional convention. It's an amendments convention.